From vinyl music sounds to lively verbal go-arounds.
This is Into the Runout.
Hey, Tony.
Hey, John.
How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing fine.
Great to be co-hosting again. I feel better this week. We missed an episode, as all of our viewers probably noticed, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's going to happen every once in a while.
Yeah, our attempts to record recently hit a little snare. John was not in any condition to record, so but in the spirit of surge forward, he looked at his schedule and realized that he had a couple of weekend commitments. But here's John with a different background on site while the wife is doing business, the trooper that he is.
Yep.
And we're recording today. And we're going to give you a podcast, doggone it, if we have to go through hell and high water to do it.
We're going to make it happen.
Yep. We're just hoping and praying that John's signal holds out in his hotel where he's
well,
staying.
Yeah. You know, the hotel Wi-Fi is not necessarily the most reliable thing.
No. So we're just hoping and praying that everything goes smooth and you get the chance to see this episode with no glitches or hiccups.
It'll work. Fingers crossed. We got it.
Absolutely. So,
we're talking about the man today.
Yes, the man.
The myth. The legend.
The legend. And that would be Mr. Jim Croce.
It's a long overdue episode, I think.
Yeah. And it's kind of apropos that we covered Jim because this is the month of his birthday. He just celebrated what would have been his, 80?
Born in 43.
Yeah, 43. So, so it would have been his 82nd birthday.
Yep.
Or something like that. Yeah, because he was 30 when he passed away.
Born January 10th.
January 10th. So, so this is an opportunity to dive in and explore a man who was only with us for a short period of time, but in that short time left a body of work that half century later, people are still discovering, listening to, being inspired by, and loving, because the man wrote from his life experiences and from a deep well of musical inspiration and innovation. And, it's an artist that I grew up listening to because my dad was a big Jim Croce fan. And a couple of years ago, my mom came down from Chicago and we went to see his son AJ perform at the Ryman, where he sang his dad's songs and played some songs of his own, and songs that inspired both him and his dad. And it was just a great to hear Jim's songs all over again. But,
Yeah, and his son's very talented in his own right.
Yeah, totally different style, totally different approach, but still that same ability to tell a good story verbally and musically, and definitely carries that Croce name. And and a great way to celebrate his dad's legacy and to give his music new voice and new awareness.
So, us being Chicago guys, my favorite song and first song that I remember hearing was Bad Leroy Brown, of course.
Oh, absolutely.
And of course, singing about South Side of Chicago, which is even more apropos. But he had a wealth of music way before this.
He did.
And I just started listening to his first album for the first time earlier today, and man, that was from 66. What's the name of that album, Tony?
Well, he did an album with his wife Ingrid, and it had some really good material on it. I think it was Bombs Over Puerto Rico. I think that was the name of the album that him and his wife Ingrid endeavored to do together. And it was they met at kind of what one of those hootenannies back in the day, and Ingrid fell madly in love.
And he's a Philadelphia guy, right?
He is.
I didn't know that about him. I did a little
Yeah,
research, and that was kind of interesting. I figured he would be more of a more maybe country roots, not as much of a cityfied guy as he was.
yeah.
Educated man
So
too.
educated first in his family to attend and graduate. He went to Villanova University, and while he was there, he had the opportunity to actually DJ at the radio
Mm,
station,
cool.
in which he was able to play a lot of the songs that his father played and that he grew up knowing, a lot of old country and blues
Folk.
and folk and
Yep.
yeah, just the kind of songs that really inspired Jim and made him want to endeavor into a life of music.
Yeah, I know. I did some reading, and I think growing up in his house, he had, his family being of Italian descent, um, listened to a lot of Enrico Caruso, so some opera in the house, and then a lot of Fats Waller,
Yeah,
which I
how about
thought,
that?
yeah, that's an interesting combo. But then I'm like, it's not that interesting because I have a lot of those albums at home, Fats Waller and Enrico. So I'm like, man, I guess it must be an Italian thing.
Yeah. And the artists that do go on and find their expression, you find a kind of an eclectic combination of music that is in their musical soul, which I think is really really cool. And when years ago I was and in fact I went to YouTube and pulled up the episode again back in the early 2000s when Behind the Music was on its maiden voyage and giving us all these interesting biographical stories. They devoted one to Jim Croce, and I watched it many, many times. And so I just went back last night and just kind of, just watched it again for probably the 20th time. But, it's there was this stuff of audio footage of an old church talent show in which you can hear Jim even as a young boy sing it away, just and you could tell the gift was there even then, and his family very musical instruments and they were performing and singing. So Jim had a musical foundation that was indescribable, and it certainly motivated him to you know pursue that and kind of find his own voice, which
Yeah,
as he learned to perfect the guitar, it was obvious that he was going to go that folk route, which many artists at the time were going in that direction. You had your Arlo
Bob.
Guthrie's
Yep.
and your James Taylors and even Bonnie Raitt, kind of more bluesy, but still kind of folky. And interestingly enough, them and also Jimmy Buffett, they all befriended Jim Croce and they all hung out together at Jim and Ingrid's house out in Lindell, Pennsylvania on the farm. And it
Interesting.
was there where they spent a lot of time just hanging around, playing music, drinking, as Ingrid said, dandelion wine, getting high, and just enjoying the moments together. But he said, it had to have been quite an experience knowing that there you have this musical commune of, artists that would all in their own unique ways make their mark in the music business. But here they all were hanging out together.
Yeah, and one you mentioned Jim playing guitar at an early age, and you could see his talent even at that age. But the one thing that doesn't really show itself at the beginning is the songwriting ability. And I think he had an amazing songwriting ability, and he wrote a lot of things that were personal and relatable, as opposed to writing about things that are unrealistic or things that just aren't natural. And being from Pennsylvania, he wrote in his first album, and I just looked at it, I think it's called Facets, not Faucets, Facets.
That's it.
um
Yeah.
and back in 1966, and you can hear him writing about trains and coal and that kind of thing, so all
Yeah.
relatable stuff. And
Oh,
I
absolutely.
get a huge I don't know what I'm trying to say. I can hear a lot of Bob Dylan in his first album because he's
Oh,
playing the harmonica and obviously the guitar, and the songwriting's coming out, and just the tone, a way that he carries over. His singing has a lot of that, and it's a lot of folk in that very first album.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, you can't help but be, I think, a product of that era and not have been impacted subtly or overtly by Bob Dylan, because his musical approach and his ability to write and communicate was so groundbreaking and
Yeah,
so innovative and so infectious, if you may say, that,
right.
it's like an artist could just start playing and realize, oh my goodness, I'm channeling Bob Dylan.
Well, yeah, and Bob Dylan was such a great songwriter that when you heard his lyrics back then, I'm sure, and even now, it makes you wonder, man, if he can write that, I wonder what I can write. So it makes people not only just want to be a musician, but people want to actually write words down on a piece of paper and just see what comes out of it. And you may not come anywhere near Bob Dylan's writing ability, but Jim
yeah,
Croce sure did.
absolutely. And what I think makes Jim's story unique is when he was doing the music that led to Facets and the album that him and his wife recorded. It was at a time when Jim, signed some contracts. There were people that were interested in promoting his music, and it was contracts that were, of course, a product of the era, where it was really just a bunch of opportunistic, shady, underhanded executives that were putting artists pretty much in a chokehold, a stranglehold, a place where now creatively they were in handcuffs and they were never going to be able to profit on the music that they created, the songs that they wrote. Publishing was given up, you know, distribution was given up, artistic expression was stifled. And that's what kind of led Jim to kind of swear off writing and doing anything with music for a season, because as him and Ingrid were going along in their marriage, it was like, well, he's got to find some way to support his family. And while, he was going out and doing college concerts and things of that at the time in their early part of the marriage, that wasn't going to cut it. So that's when he
Right.
went into the workforce
Yep.
and took on blue collar jobs, got in with, the cement, you know, construction and various other lines of work. And it was the interactions with his blue collar friends where, on weekends they would go and they would go to the roller derby, or they would go see Rapid Roy, or they would go to the tattoo parlors. And it was in that time and that experiences that Jim was either mentally or literally jotting down all of these life experiences. And it was finally when he found out, and him and Ingrid found out that they were going to have a child, that was when Jim finally, you know, sat down and pretty much in a week's time wrote the material that became that first album, You Don't Mess Around with Jim. And as you said, the songs that really express something authentic and real, because it was authentic and real.
Exactly. And they sound, they sound like, if you listen to his songs, they kind of sound like mini movies.
Right?
Right. You hear them and
Absolutely.
can hear the story develop, and most of it's relatable, and you can tell it's a personal story.
Absolutely. And if we look at the music that was on that first album, we have You Don't Mess Around with Jim, Tomorrow's Gonna Be a Brighter Day, New York's Not My Home, Hard Time Losing Man, Photographs and Memories, Walking Back to Georgia, Operator, Time in a Bottle, Rapid Roy, Box Number 10, Long Time Ago, Hey Tomorrow. I mean, many of those songs extremely biographical. I mean, I personally love New York's Not My Home, because in the year that Jim and Ingrid were in New York, that was Jim's experience. And Box Number 10, another part of that journey into New York. But I mean, the lyric of New York's Not My Home, it wasn't a chart song, but you listen to the lyric and you listen to what he is saying in that song. I mean, though the streets are crowded, there's something strange about it. I lived there for a year and I never once felt at home. Like, wow, you know? I thought I'd make the big time. I learned a lot of lessons awful quick, and now I'm telling you, they were not the nice kind. It's so long that I have felt fine. And wow.
Let, let's see that album cover again. Interesting.
Interestingly enough, this right here is the entry into an outhouse that was on the grounds of the farmhouse in Lindell, Pennsylvania. And
Okay.
when they did the behind the music, Ingrid took a trip back to the farmhouse, and that outhouse is still there at the time they recorded it, like 20 years ago, or how many years back it was. But when she walked up to it, she's like, well, it's it's not quite as it's not quite as strong as it was 30 years ago, but it's really not, it really hasn't changed too much. But yeah, it was inside that outhouse entry that they took the picture that would be on the album. So, and
Yeah,
I think again, that's talk about blue collar,
exactly. And it's interesting. He went blue collar too, because he did get a degree in social studies at Villanova.
He did.
But I think he just knew that's not really what he wanted to do. So he just put himself in situations that would eventually get him there, probably maybe subconsciously. I don't know if it was a conscious decision to do that. But then wound up, having a great, very short career, but a great career as a musician. Now on that album, there's a lot of hits on there, obviously, and you hear them on the radio, especially on the easy listening radios or adult contemporary radio. But the title track's one of my favorite songs, because it's got that. We talked about this before. It has movement to it with the guitar and just the beat. It just feels like it's a move. The song's moving, and you're getting ready to get into the album.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, and and of course, a great way to start an album with You Don't Mess Around with Jim, because it was this kind of mini movie. And and Jim in his indelible style, hooks us with this immediate analogy of, okay, Uptown got its hustlers, Bowery got its bums, 42nd Street got Big Jim Walker. He's a pool shooting son of a gun. And here you go. You're off on the run, learning about who Jim is. And then just when you think there's more to learn about Jim, here comes another character into the movie, From South Alabama comes a country boy, Slim. And Slim's looking for Jim, and the gang of 42nd Street driving a drop-top Cadillac. I mean, wow. I mean, nobody was writing songs like those quite as, just illustrative and visual, and it just the imagery just makes you imagine in your mind what you're actually listening to.
Yeah, I'm trying to think while you're talking. I'm trying to think of, is he one of the first or the first person to talk specifically about a person and kind of make that a theme of the album? Jim, Leroy Brown, and kind of inspiring people later, like The Who with Tommy and Kilroy, and Pink Floyd with a themed album about, a crazy person. And
right.
Is he kind of one of the innovators to do that? I don't know.
It's it's very possible. Very possible, because I mean, Jim was certainly forging some interesting and kind of groundbreaking territory in the way he was writing songs and recording them. And of course, when he finally decided that, okay, I got to go back to New York and face those horrible people, of course, that he was able to be enhanced by, some really, really good musicians and players. And it was in that time that he, of course, befriended, another artist who kind of became his, partner in crime, so to speak, in concerts and in life. And of course, that was the late Maury Milhausen, who, just complimented Jim in all of his performances, a great guitarist in his own right, a budding songwriter, and an artist who, no doubt, had he lived, he certainly would have had, a solid career in his own right, because he was developing his own musical identity. But together, the two of them, they really, really made a great pair live, and they really just, Maury complimented Jim in so many different ways. Great harmonies, great combination of playing, and and it just enhanced Jim's live performances for sure.
Now he did a lot of touring, and I guess it kind
Yes.
of kind of got to him after a while, and then just wanted to. He thought about quitting touring just to spend more time with his family.
Well, yeah, and that was what he was really endeavoring to do at the time of the unfortunate plane crash that took his life. He
Yeah.
was he had he and Ingrid had moved from Pennsylvania to go out to San Diego because they wanted to get away from, just what had been and start something new. And Ingrid even said in the documentary, she's like, I just wanted life to be normal. In fact, there was a community that they looked at in San Diego called Normal Heights because I just wanted to do something that was normal. And so, but they did settle in San Diego. They took a walk down the street together right before Jim went back out on the what was going to be the last leg of his tour that year. And it was on that street after he passed that Ingrid eventually opened up a restaurant commemorating and honoring Jim's life. And she stayed out there in San Diego. And as far as I know, she's still running one branch of the Croce's restaurant because the original one they had to vacate because of crazy, politics that bumped them out of the building, or a landlord. But yeah, you would go inside that restaurant and there was just all kinds of a big mural of Jim on the wall and memorabilia and all the things that that honored his life. So Ingrid did a wonderful job of preserving Jim's name in that respect.
I wonder if they had a sandwich named after him,
You know what?
like the Croce croissant or something like that.
It's very possible. One day I was looking at the menu and there might have been something in there. You just never know. But yeah, but then you think about obviously Photographs and Memories was a wonderful song. Operator, I mean, another wonderful track. Just the story of a man trying to, you know, get in contact with a lost love, and finally, of course the song segues and he just realizes, it's not even worth it, but thanks for the effort. You can keep the dime.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a great song.
yeah, absolutely great song. And
Of course, you got Time in the Bottle.
yeah, which Jim wrote inspired by the news and the reality that he was bringing, that he was going to become a father. And
Yep.
as Ingrid said, mortality inspired Jim to write a song about immortality. And yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
one of the things that I'll always carry with me, for the rest of my life is when Mom and I went to see AJ 2 years ago. He encored one song, and of course, that was the song that was the encore. And and Mom and I clutched arms, we held each other, and took in the experience because it was kind of a full circle at the concert and a full circle for us because we hadn't been to a concert since Dad had passed.
Right.
And we had been to a concert seeing Barry Manilow in Chicago literally 1 year before we said goodbye to Dad. So it was one of those full circle moments for us, listening to the son of a man who, Dad absolutely loved and raised all of us on. So yeah, it was great. But yeah, one of those wonderful songs that speaks of, a soon to be father talking about something that, something beautiful.
There's a lot
Something
of
beautiful.
lot of father son songs around that era. Cats in the Cradle and
Oh yeah.
songs of the like. But I wonder, I know you never get over a parent's passing, so I'm sure AJ feels emotion every time he sings that song, and I'm sure it took time to, be able to open up to that song more. Not everybody has a song that famous that's written about them.
No, that's absolutely true. And AJ's story is a unique one because, he worked very hard to forge his own musical identity. And while he wasn't trying to avoid because obviously you can never avoid, when you go down the musical path and being the son of a famous singer. But AJ worked very hard to kind of forge his own musical trail, which he did exceptionally well. But then he got to that point of his life where he was turning a corner into his 40s, and he started to slowly incorporate a little bit more of his dad's music. And there was a great little video that he did years ago where he had one of Jim's old guitars and he just sang the song These Dreams. And the way he was playing it, you could hear the vivid sound of the guitar, and you could say, oh yeah, that was definitely Jim's guitar. And the way AJ was singing it, it was like, it was more in the style of Jim. And it was the beginning of those homage and those tributes that ultimately brought him full circle in his own life to say, okay, it's time now to give voice to, my dad and give him, another, tribute, and give this generation the opportunity to learn more about his music. And who better to communicate that but his offspring. And
now, obviously, I knew about Jim Croce growing up, but by the time I got to your record collection in high school, you had some Jim Croce records on you, as we know.
I had one, but it was a good one.
Yeah, and you played that for me, but while we were listening to that, that's the very first time that I heard the story that he had died in a plane crash, and he had so much posthumous success. And that's the first time I ever kind of, grasped that that's something that could happen, that you could have hits and be famous after you die.
Yeah, and it was really his death that did create a groundswell of interest. And
because he only had one number one hit while he was alive, I think.
Yeah.
Leroy Brown.
And
then Time in a Bottle went number one after he passed.
Correct. Yeah, which was, appropriate. Because, I mean, if there's a song that can go number one, that should certainly be, the one, because it's an iconic song.
Yeah.
But yeah, and what I liked about even just the compilation album, there are some great liner notes by a man who knew Jim, who wrote about him. And, and he just talked about Jim's life and his musical talents, and he starts out by saying, I once dared Jim to sing Okie from Muskogee for me, and he accepted, but he put it off till the next day. I never saw him again, and I never heard him sing it. But it went into Jim's depth as an artist, and his friend Josh Mills said that, Jim in time would have undoubtedly become one of those singers that would have been a great interpreter of other people's music, as well as, writing still more of his own, because Jim at 30 years old still had so many more life experiences in him that he would have been able to put to music. Now, he would have obviously had to, dance around the logistics of the industry that had him, locked in to 300 days a year on the road and not making remotely the money needed to support a family. There was those legal wranglings that probably would have resulted, but unfortunately that just was the industry of the time, and in a lot of ways some would argue that hasn't changed much, that artists still don't have a whole lot of artistic freedom. There's always, which is, I think, the reason why in this era of Spotify and Apple Music and so many other, sites, you have a lot of artists that are just releasing things independently and saying, you know what, I don't need the confinements of the industry to tell me what I can and cannot do, and how often I need to go on the road and be, St. Peter don't to tell me because I can't go. Don't call me. I've sold my soul to the company store. I mean, that was obviously a real life story about, the people that were, driven to literal death to work and labor, but the artists in a lot of ways feel the same way.
Yeah, Billy Joel did a little stabs in his days as well.
Yes, he did.
Keep the song down to what, 305?
Yep, down to 305 and thrown out, off the shelf like a can of beans. And yeah, I am the entertainer, and I'm here to sing my
Well,
song.
yeah, I mean, obviously, most recently, Taylor Swift was famous for re-recording all of her stuff because the record label had a tight grasp on that. And Salt and Peppa, they also re-recorded "Push It" because they don't get anything off of that. So yeah, the record companies and back in the day, the radio stations had the majority of the control over the artists, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, what's amazing is despite all those confinements, you see ultimately the gift, the musical talent, the creativity, the authenticity. It shines through, and it allows the public to ultimately have the final say.
Yeah.
You may own the rights, the publishing rights, the distribution rights, the creative rights, but you know what? We, the public, have the final say. And, we will ultimately determine, the value of an artist. And I would say it's pretty obvious now, a half century later, Jim Croce's work is gained the kind of global renown that probably would amaze even Jim, despite being a man who was learning early on that he was having great success. But, I think it would still leave him astounded because, the timelessness of his music is just, it's amazing.
It's timeless because he wrote about personal stuff. That's the
Yeah,
main reason. Because it's so
absolutely.
relatable. So relatable.
Yep. And then he followed that album up with an album called Life and Times,
Mm-hmm.
which included some additional really good stuff. One Less Set of Footsteps, Roller Derby Queen, Dreamin' Again, Careful Man, Alabama Rain, A Good Time, Man Like Me, Ain't Got No Business, Singing the Blues, Next Time, This Time, Bad Leroy Brown, These Dreams, Speedball, Tucker, It Doesn't Have to Be That Way. More songs that were a continuation of many of the blue collar and work experiences, the life that Jim was living pre-recording, songs that were an extension of his life, of his experiences, of his creativeness and his ability to take those accounts, those experiences, put them to lyric, record them, and of course, an album not as successful as You Don't Mess Around with Jim. That became an instant gold album, but still, I mean, Bad Leroy Brown, incredible song. And like you
Yep.
started up by saying, it's like, for us coming from the south side of Chicago, we instantly were, like, wow, Bad Leroy Brown,
Yeah, it was personal to us because of the Chicago references, but it was also a great song because it was different than most songs were around that time. It was just something new and fresh and fun.
Yeah, it was. And I think I might have maybe said it on a previous podcast episode somewhere last year, but when Mom and I were at the AJ Croce concert and he did Bad Leroy Brown, playing on the screen in the background was an interesting animated video that was made of the song. And I remember seeing it as a boy on the children's show, The Great Space Coaster,
Yeah.
the one character that showed the little video, he popped up in the thing, and it took us, I think it was either Knock Knock or Gorilla. Oh God, what was the
Gorilla
character?
Gazoo?
Yeah, something like that. But one of them said, I'd like to, could you tell me a story about King Kong? Or it's like, well, I know somebody who was tougher than King Kong and a junkyard dog, and boom, took us right to the video of Bad Leroy Brown. But it's like, it was playing on the screen as AJ was playing, and I said to my mom, I said, Mom, this is the animated video that showed that I watched as a boy on the Great Space Coaster.
I vaguely remember that. It's funny you bring that up. I do remember that. And that's
Yeah.
maybe the first time I heard that, or maybe it was on 8-track because we did have it on 8-track also. But yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. And I
That
mean,
should
I
be
don't
on
know.
YouTube somewhere, I think.
Oh, I'm sure it is. And it's funny. When I watched it, I'm like, oh my God, I don't think I've seen that since that episode of the Great Space Coaster when I was like 13 years old. I'm like, that is unbelievable. But it was, yeah, it's amazing how images and experiences literally can transport you. Marty, gotta go back to the future, back in the DeLorean, and here I am sitting in front of, whatever TV it was where I was watching that as a 12 or 13-year-old, and it just transported me right back to Dalton, Illinois, and, remembering Jim as an artist and being just like, wow, what a cool a cool little cartoon video to an iconic song.
Well, we're talking about Jim Croce, and we're in the posthumous era, and he's doing better than ever. Unfortunately, he's not around to enjoy the benefits, I guess. So I don't want to wrap it up, but do you have any highlights you want to speak about before we do wrap it up?
Well, I do want to touch on the third album, which came out right before he did pass away. And again, it was a continuation of some really good material that was showing that Jim was not losing his stride at all. I Got a Name, which was a fabulous song.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, it was used. He recorded the album version, but then he also did like a second recording that was used for like a television movie that came out. And I can't remember the movie, but I was watching it one day on YouTube, and it was really fascinating. But it's a song that after he passed away, it became a huge hit. But then you had Lover's Cross, another wonderful song. 5 Short Minutes, Age, Working at the Car Wash Blues. I Have to Say I Love You in a Song.
Great song.
Yeah. Salon and Saloon, which was actually written by his partner, Maury Milhisen. And it's the only song that actually featured a piano theme song that didn't have Jim playing guitar. And so but it tells the story of a reunion at school, and it's this guy sitting across from Mary. They're in, he's like lives the life of just kind of hopping around the bars. Mary's the one that works in a salon. She probably does hair, but it's this kind of interaction of reminiscing on old times. And it's a really, really thoughtful and neat song that they had literally, recorded not long before, they went back out on the road. But again, another evidence of Jim recording something that was a little outside his realm. But if you listen to it, it's a wonderful little song. And Thursday, Top Hat Bar and Grill, which of course became the name of the restaurant that Ingrid opened up in San Diego.
Okay.
Croce's Top Hat Bar and Grill. That was the initial restaurant that was opened up. And recently, Hard Way Every Time, which his friend on the compilation said, the lyric is, that for Jim, that was really kind of the story of his life, and in fact, let me pull out the actual the lyric. And in chasing what I thought were moonbeams, I've run into a couple of walls, but in looking back at the faces I've been, I would sure be the first one to say, when I look at myself today, wouldn't have done it any other way. But it's like, it's the hard way every time. And I mean, for Jim, that was kind of the story of his life. It really was the hard way every time. There was never an easy moment for Jim. Whether it was the struggle to try to break into the music business, whether it was dealing with the logistical nightmares of the industry, whether it was having to spend so much time on the road, struggling with the finances, wondering how he could still continue a career and not be able to be confined by those demands. I mean, a man who's had, never an easy road for Jim. To sadly, what would be how tragically ironic that the plane crash that took his life came after a concert that he and Maury did. It was at Southwestern State College in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and it was a college stop that he was going to do the previous year before he became famous, but he had to cancel the show because he was sick. And Jim was never an artist that ever canceled anything, but he had to do it because of an illness. But he told the concert promoters that he would make up the concert as soon as he could. And as it wound up, September 20th, 1973 would be the night that he was able to go and fulfill that commitment. And it was in the aftermath that he got in the chartered plane with him and Maury and his four other, people. And there's a lot of, kind of rumor and innuendo about the state of mind of the pilot, the condition he might have been in. I read an account that maybe he was a little disheveled, he was a little disoriented, maybe not quite oriented to time and place or paying close attention to the environment. But as the plane took off the runway right outside the campus, it didn't get high enough up elevation, and the plane clipped a row of pecan trees at the end of the runway, and it caused the plane to ultimately crash. So it was, terribly unfortunate, because here was Jim, and again, it speaks again of the ridiculousness of the era, that you have this artist that is, gained chart success, has a gold album, is filling stadiums up all around the country. He's on the road working like a slave, and the best you can do is provide him a chartered plane. I mean, this is a man who should have been flying commercial. This is a man who should have been flying first class. This is a man who should have been, been given far better treatment than what he was, receiving. And yet that was the nature of the industry, just totally just suck the man dry, take all the money, pocket it for yourselves, and, say, good luck trying to get to the next train, the next show, while you take your chartered plane late at night flying with, a pilot who probably maybe had no business being behind, the wheel of a plane flying 6 lives, who had purpose. But again, the nature of life and the nature of the business and the nature, unfortunately, of reality, that, at a moment's notice, and as they say with the case with plane crashes, it's always a chain of things that lead up to the ultimate crash. And if you take one of those links of the chain out, it, can ultimately result in something different. But on that particular night, all of those links led to a very short and tragic flight that led to,
and
terribly.
Not to make a joke out of it, but you got to think, as a musician, I do it as a non-musician. If you ever are pointed towards a charter plane, you got to instantly think Buddy Holly. I'm not getting on that plane.
Right. And I mean, then that was, an instance where, my God, they were in a snowstorm in Iowa. I mean, and the bus is broken down. It's not running well. But again, here's a whole bunch of guys on the road. They're recording stars. Buddy Holly's having great success. Richie Valens is at the top of the chart. The Big Boppers, having a blast.
Bopping away.
I mean, and they're performing with Dion on that dance tour. So, I mean, Waylon Jennings is there, young Waylon Jennings. He was the one who gave up his spot on the plane, and, survivor's remorse. He went through decades regretting the fact that he gave up that spot on the plane and somebody died. But I mean, again, the nature of the business. Why in the world are these guys getting broken down tour buses? Why are they being put on chartered planes in horrible, hellish weather that any, airport now would say, no, you're not flying in that. There's no way. It's not safe.
Do you think if Jim Croce didn't pass, do you think he would still have a career today, or do you think he would have cut it cold turkey? Because I know he was kind of phasing out. But do you think he would have came back and gave it another shot, and would he have been successful?
I think he would have, because I think because he was already establishing himself at the time of his death, and he was gaining a lot of interest. I think he would have been the kind of artist that I think would have continued. I really believe that, because his first three albums were so real, as we talked about, just real because they were from life experiences. I think there was a whole lot more of the quill that wasn't going to run dry anytime soon in Jim Croce, the writer. And I think his friend said, Josh Mills, that, he would have learned in time to have an opportunity to interpret other people's songs. I think there would have been other projects, might have even got him together with a couple other artists, maybe
Yeah.
do, tours, got together with a James Taylor, done work with James. I mean, there would have been endless possibilities, I think, for Jim.
I think
And
he
I
could have been
think,
I think he could have been a Wilbury.
it's very possible. I
There's
mean,
always room for
God.
another Wilbury.
Yeah, I mean, after Roy Orbison passed away, if Jim was still around, it's like, come on, Jim, join us in the Wilburys. I mean, talk about that. I mean, imagine Jim Croce alongside Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, Jeff Lynne, and George Harrison. Wow. And I think, too, with his college education and his musical abilities, he taught guitar when
Yeah.
he was, early on. So, I mean, he certainly could have been one of those guys who could have been a professor emeritus at any musical university. I mean, he certainly had a professorial side to him, with the long hair and the mustache. And, he could have easily gone into a classroom and, taught music theory. He could certainly have been one of those guys who could have come and broadened his musical interests in a producing capacity. He could have been one of those guys that could have ultimately trained up a generation of young folk stars, and who knows? I mean, the opportunities that Jim could have forged in life, I think, were endless if he would have been able to get beyond that periphery of limitations that were in front of him at the time he died.
Okay. Well, what else we got?
Well, last but not least, ABC Records did release a posthumous album. This is, of course, the line from Hard Way Every Time, The Faces I've Been. And it included a lot of songs that came from that Facets era.
Mhm.
And also some stuff that he recorded that were like songs that never made the album, like the Chain Gang Medley. He recorded that song at the end of his life, and it wound up being on the album. Mississippi Lady, he did a version of Old Man River. He did a song called Which Way Are You Going? And then a lot of the older stuff, Charlie Green, Play That Slide Trombone, and Sun Come Up, Gunga Din, Pig Song, This Is Your Land, which, of course, an homage to Arlo Guthrie, who's, son Arlo, he got, Woody Guthrie, whose son Arlo, he was close friends with. Railroads and Riverboats, Railroad Song, The Way We Used to, Maybe Tomorrow, Stonewall, I Remember Mary, Country Girl. So, an opportunity to give the world a little bit more of Jim after he passed away, and to kind of show the world his talents pre-success and what was potentially to come that didn't come. But still, a man who was, in his own way, was proving that he could definitely interpret another song that had already been a hit.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the Chain Gang medley, it's a great song. It's Jim just showing his ability to take a song and put his own, fingerprint on it and giving us something really special.
Well, I hope everybody's learned a lot from this episode, because I've learned that there's a wealth of song catalog that I haven't heard outside of the radio hits from Jim Croce, and obviously the more popular albums. So I'm going to have to dig deep here after the show and listen to everything else.
Yeah, and I mean, for starters, this is definitely the album you would love to go and get, because it's the 14 track, one that compiles his most memorable hits, most indelible hits. But then beyond that, certainly great. And as I showed it previously, this is the remix that was put together a couple of years ago, and it's his first 3 albums.
Yeah.
And you can either get it on vinyl or CD, but it's great to hear the songs remastered and
Mm-hmm.
and read, in a fresh way. And I think it's really well done. So yeah, so for those who want to dive deeper into, the Jim Croce catalog, there's other compilation albums too, but I mean, the studio albums, the compilation, the Faces I've Been album, once you get those in your library, you pretty much have. Then of course there is some live albums that got released, like there's a video called Have You Heard Jim Croce Live? There was a live CD that got released years ago of stuff live, and of course you can go online on YouTube. Somebody actually uploaded an audio recording of the concert at Northwest State College, so
Nice.
you can actually hear Jim in his final performance.
Oh, that's good. That's good to have. Unfortunately, that was an era where people still hadn't caught on to the fact that they should record everything live, or as much as they could, because that's stuff that musicians and audiophiles would cherish for a long time. So it's hard to find those rare concerts like that. And it's a good thing that person recorded it for sure.
And it's true. I was just reading something recently. Dennis Young was lamenting about somebody that had done an online reaction to the song Lady. And it was this live version, but Dennis was saying it's a shame because back in the day we had so many performances where there could have been a better live version of it to react to.
Yeah.
But there was these things, we can't record live, we can't do this, we can't, and all these can't tos led to a lot of stuff, not being recorded, which is unfortunate.
Right. Bootlegging was a big deal back then in the 70s.
Oh, yes, it was.
You ever see that episode of What's Happening when Rerun took the cassette recorder and recorded the Doobie Brothers in concert?
Doobie Brothers! Yep, and there he is dancing, and then the tape player hit the floor, and there he is around the band.
And then he had to be a double spy. Then he had to go in and do it again.
He had to do it again!
So they could bust the real guys.
There he is, though. The band sitting around Rerun, looking all disappointed at him. And then when they finally get the cassette, it's him crunching popcorn and singing to the song. You can't even hear the Doobie Brothers.
Classic episode.
That's a classic episode, But
that show was classic. I love that show.
Oh, it was. It absolutely was. I mean, who didn't like what's happening? I mean, yeah.
Well, I think that wraps it up. Hey.
Hey.
Let's not do the catchphrases. We'll be here all day.
Right.
Let's do a catchphrase episode.
Hey, now that sounds good. Here, Johnny.
We did it. Jim Croce. Great show. Thanks for sharing your information, your wealth of information, Tony.
Oh, hey, it's my pleasure. So, well, let me go. Before we do go, what would you say, are like, if you had to name like 3 Jim Croce songs that would be like your top 3?
Leroy Brown, Operator, and I'll just say Time in a Bottle. I don't want to be the guy that picks the obvious, but that has to be my 3 favorite.
No, I would say those are great ones too. I kind of feel the same way. They're really 3 of the better ones. And yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with putting those at the 3 at the top because I think they're the 3 of the songs that are most, when you think of Jim Croce, those songs are undoubtedly, most connected to him. But I love the fact that he has such a rich and deep body of work, despite the fact that he only did 3 actual studio albums. I mean, what he gave us that never saw the light of day on the radio, man, now it's like you go back and it's like, wow, he really was in a lot of ways before his time.
Well, I think that wraps it up. I want to thank everybody for watching and thank all of our subscribers on YouTube. And if you're also interested in listening to us and not watching us on YouTube, please feel free to follow us on Spotify and Amazon and Audible and iHeartRadio and everywhere else in between. I really do appreciate it, and I know Tony does as well.
Yeah, we do. And like and subscribe us on YouTube so that you can stay updated on any and all comings and goings of the podcast, special things that we're planning on doing as we move into the new year. And, we're endeavoring to keep things constantly flowing with, with the content and the albums and the artists that make music worth listening to, and the discussions that, that make, this podcast possible. And we so appreciate everybody who views this and takes time out of your lives to join us on our fun little musical journey. So like and subscribe. We appreciate you a whole lot. And yeah.
Take us out.
All right. Well, we will see you on our next episode when the music fades.
The discussion begins.
See you next time on Into the Runout.
See you on side 2.
Yay!